Today we're going to talk about the Cathars. They were a medieval religious group branded as heretics, and they were wiped out in a brutal crusade. But their story didn't end there. In fact, that's where it really began, transforming into one of history's most compelling and persistent myths.
And a lot of that story begins right here, at the incredible fortress of Montségur. For centuries, this place has stood as a symbol of heroic resistance, of a tragic and final defeat, and, for some, a place of secrets still waiting to be discovered. But before we get into the legend, we need to understand the real history. So what is the truth at the heart of the Cathar Enigma? Were they just another forgotten Christian sect from the Middle Ages? Or do they hold some kind of secret key to bigger mysteries? You know, the ones involving the Holy Grail, the Knights Templar, maybe even the Freemasons. Let's dig in and try to separate the historical facts from the incredible fantasy. All right, first things first. To really get a handle on the Cathars, you have to start with their worldview, because it was so radical, so completely different, that it put them on a direct collision course with the most powerful institution in Europe, the Roman Catholic Church. The absolute bedrock of Cathar belief was something called dualism. Now think about it like this. They believed that the entire material world, everything you can see and touch, wasn't created by the good, loving God. No, it was the work of an evil or at least a lesser creator, a fallen God. This one idea changed everything. It meant that the good God was completely innocent of all the evil, suffering, and death in the world. It's a powerful thought, and for the church, it was an incredibly dangerous one.
And this belief didn't just stay the same. It actually evolved over time. At first, most Cathars had what we'd call a mitigated view. That's on the left here. Basically, one good God made everything, and then a fallen angel, Satan, was responsible for all the bad stuff. But then, after a really important meeting in 1167, their thinking shifted to something far more extreme: absolute dualism. This wasn't about a fallen angel anymore. This was a cosmic war between two eternal, co-equal gods, one of pure good and spirit, and one of pure evil and matter. And once they took that step, there was no way to reconcile their beliefs with Christianity.
Now, at the very heart of the Cathar faith, you had the perfects. These were the spiritual elite. And they didn't just talk the talk, they truly walked the walk. They lived these incredibly pure lives, no meat, no sex, no possessions, all to try and free that little divine spark of goodness trapped inside their material bodies. They didn't even call themselves priests, just good men and good women. And you can imagine, when you compare their lifestyle to the often corrupt and wealthy local clergy, you can see why the ordinary people of the Languedoc region absolutely revered them.
Well, as you might guess, this growing movement and its popularity could not be ignored by Rome. And what followed was one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Middle Ages. A crusade, not against an enemy in a faraway land, but against fellow Christians, right in the heart of Europe.
And this quote from Pope Innocent III tells you so much about the real motivation. Sure, it was about theology, but it was also about power. For the Pope, crushing heresy was a way of establishing his authority over kings, over emperors. It was a political play for control of the entire world.
The flashpoint came in 1208, when a representative of the Pope was assassinated. That was all the justification Pope Innocent needed. He launched the Albigensian Crusade, a brutal war that raged for decades. It all came to a head in 1244 at Montségur. After a long siege, the fortress finally fell, and over 200 of the Cathar prefects chose to walk willingly into a massive bonfire rather than give up their faith.
And here's the crucial takeaway. While this whole thing was sold as a holy war to cleanse heresy, it very quickly became a straight-up political conquest. It was the perfect excuse for the French monarchy in the north to conquer the independent, wealthy, and culturally different lands of the south, the region we call the Languedoc.
So, the Cathars as a living faith were annihilated, but their story was just getting started. Over the next few centuries, the memory of this persecuted group was about to be resurrected and completely transformed into a modern myth.
I love this quote because it just perfectly captures the wild leap from history to legend. You have to believe that those 200-plus Cathars who died at Montségur would have been absolutely baffled if you'd asked them where they hid the Holy Grail. That idea, that was invented hundreds of years after they were gone.
This myth didn't just spring out of nowhere. It was built step by step, mostly in the 19th century. It was the Romantic era, and people were obsessed with heroic lost causes and ancient secrets. The Cathars were the perfect candidates. First, a historian named Charles Schmidt brought the name Cathar back into use. Then, a writer, Napoleon Peyrat, turned them from heretics into noble heroes and made Montségur their sacred temple. And finally, occultists like Josephine Péladan took the final massive leap and connected the Cathars to the Holy Grail, grafting a mystical quest onto a real historical tragedy.
And that reinvention really set the stage for the most powerful part of the entire Cathar myth, this idea that their secret knowledge never really died, that it was secretly passed down through other mysterious groups like the Knights Templar and eventually the Freemasons.
So on the one hand, you have this really compelling esoteric theory. The Templars, who were also persecuted, secretly allied with the Cathars, saved their treasure or their wisdom, and then passed it down the line to the Freemasons. But the actual historical record is a lot murkier. For the most part, the Templars weren't even operating in Cathar lands. And yet, there are these fascinating records from one particular Templar house that show they did in fact shelter known Cathars. It's that one little detail that keeps the mystery alive.
And you know, that little tidbit is exactly the kind of thing that can fuel centuries of speculation. But here's the most ironic twist in this whole story. The grand theory that connects the Cathars, Templars, and the Freemasons, it wasn't invented by some mystic trying to uncover a hidden truth. It was actually invented by their enemies. Anti-Masonic Catholic writers in the 18th century came up with this idea to create a genealogy of evil, a way to claim that Freemasonry was just the latest chapter in an ancient conspiracy against the Church.
Now, if you look at it from a Masonic point of view, the connection isn't a direct historical bloodline. It's more of a philosophical one. You see ideas in Masonry like finding the divine spark inside yourself or perfecting yourself, what they call carving one stone. And you can't help but see a parallel with the Cathar search for inner purity and hidden knowledge.
But let's flip the coin and look at the opposing view. Here we have a text from a 19th century anti-Masonic writer, Herder, who saw this connection as something much, much more sinister.
For critics like Herder, this wasn't some philosophical similarity. It was a direct evil lineage. They truly believed that all the revolutionary ideas that were shaking up European society in their day were just the Cathar heresy in a new form, passed down in secret through the Freemasons. To them, it was one long continuous conspiracy against church and state.
And so, all of these threads bring us back here to the land itself, the Pays Cathar, or Cathar country in southern France. It's a place where history, memory, and myth have become so tangled together that you can still feel it in the air, especially in the ruins of castles like Montségur.
Which leaves us with one final, big question. Was there really a secret doctrine passed down in an unbroken chain for centuries? Or is it possible that our own deep-seated desire for a hidden history, our love for a story where the persecuted truth somehow survives against all odds, is that the most powerful legacy the Cathars actually left behind? Something to think about.